Hello everybody, how you doing? Lord PeteyTV here to give you some walkthroughs. So here in Lord PeteyTV Plays, we're going to be talking to you all about, our Mythic Pluses we're going to be running here. We're going to be running multiple different classes, for instance, Druid, Monk, Priest, Rogue, just to name a few. We're going to try to get as many of them done as possible, and we're going to kind of give you some commentary just so that you have an idea of what's going on. So thank you very much, and keep an eye on us, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. Hello everyone, and this is going to be week 8 of our Mythic Pluses, and this is going to be taking on Tyrannical, Volcanic, and Sanguine. Now, I think this is important to know and how to kind of go through things, so I want to make sure I kind of go through everything as possible as I can tell you, and I greatly appreciate you all hanging out. Now, as you notice, when we end up pulling these first couple of mobs, we end up pulling a double pack on Tyrannical, which usually isn't that big a deal. We normally are supposed to lust, but we didn't have a lust, and we didn't use drums or anything to deal with it. So we did end up having a little bit of a wipe there, which was a little bit of a problem. We also missed a bunch of kicks, as you saw, and we kind of went through to the next portion of the area. Now, the person right here, Lady Van Crest, is kind of very, very hard and difficult to deal with, and especially with the Sanguine. So we kind of try to make sure we're focusing her while DPSing the rest of the mobs. As you can see, we kind of kill them, not too hard, but we end up pretty much going through them pretty easily, killing her, and then continuing on to the boss to follow right after that. Now, one of the hardest things when you kind of run up to this boss is making sure your foot placement is correct. And what do you think I mean by that? It means that I want to make sure that we can end up DPSing properly when this boss is set all the way to the side. Once he's ran all the way to the side, he ends up giving everybody a lot more room to run around and do whatever they need to do, especially with the solo echoes. While they're running around in the melee and the ranged. Now, the other thing is that scythe that kind of gets thrown out. That scythe, you really, really want to watch out for it. It does a lot of damage, and especially on Tyrannical, that you really, really want to be careful of it. So you end up making sure that you end up getting out of the way. Now, once you go through this process, this boss really isn't too bad to deal with. So, we can end up, doing our regular rotations and just DPSing down accordingly. Now, the thing that you have to really be careful of is once you hit that 50%. Once you end up hitting that 50%, all the rest of the little guys come out from the other sides. Now, those souls are going to come out, and you got to end up DPSing them down. So, the boss itself will eventually become, pretty much immune. So, we end up, trying to do whatever we can with the souls, DPSing them down as much as we possibly can, and then at that point we end up going back to the boss. Now the souls themselves, they die not too bad, they die pretty quickly, so we keep an eye on them. We're ending up dotting those guys up, and then we end up going back to the boss. The first thing is, once that soul burst comes off, make sure you use a defensive. If you do not during Tyrannical week, you will take a huge amount of damage. I ended up not using a defensive there, as you saw, and I probably took 50% of my damage because I am stupid and I did not notice it happening. So once we end up DPSing the boss down here, he kind of goes down not too bad and kind of quickly. So we just continue to do our rotations here at the end, and he is dead.
That's probably annoying for melee.
What?
Whoops.
The, echo souls or whatever.
Are you looking to support the channel? Please make sure you go to our merch store. The link is in the comments below. We have mugs, shirts, lots of cool things that we will love you to purchase and be wearing and supporting the channel. I greatly appreciate it, and thank you so much. Now, the biggest thing we try to make sure we end up doing here is when we're going up here to fight the Rook spiders, is that we try to make sure we go up a little bit of the way. We make sure we get the cleanse off on the tank, and then we end up proceeding forward. Now, the reason for that is because once you get too many stacks on the tank for that dot, the tank instantly dies. So to play a little bit safer, we end up taking our time on doing this properly. So we're going to end up doing that, and then we're going to continue forward. Now, we end up just continuing with our rotation. We take down the Rook Spider, and then we go into the main hall. Now, the main hall here, what you want to make sure you're kind of taking a look at is you want to make sure that, the certain, DPS and the certain things that are happening really take effect, and you really want to be careful of those. So you want to end up keeping an eye on them, and you want to end up making sure you're DPSing them properly. Now, the thing that you want to really watch out for is the frontals from those archers. So you send those as best as you possibly can and kind of keep going forward. The champions really can't be affected by any type of CC, so you end up really watching those. And you want to make sure you're DPSing the Arcanists with dots. I'm sorry, not with dots, with CC and with kicks and interrupts and whatever you can do, because they are just too hard and annoying to fight and deal with. So how do you keep yourself hydrated over those long gaming sessions? Here at Lord PeteyTV, we end up using Rogue energy drinks. That is what we use here. We end up drinking those throughout the whole entire sessions. Please make sure you go there and use Lord PeteyTV at checkout when you end up purchasing some of those amazing drinks. One main thing you're going to end up noticing is that once we ended up defeating that first group, we ended up running around the corner. We end up doing that to kind of move them together so it's easier to CC, because a lot of those guys are AoEers or they're ranged. So when we end up doing that, it's kind of easier to deal with, and it's easier for us to deal with the Sanguine. Thankfully, myself and Ash both have Typhoon, so we can push those guys away. So we end up kind of going from there. And then after that, we come up here to this portion. We end up DPSing those ads pretty cleanly here in this hallway. We have seen some people deciding to take them and run up to the tank, so we can end up using them for cleave and for time for like a time saver. So it all depends upon what your group is capable of. After we end up doing that, we go right up into the boss. Now, the hardest part about dealing with Ravencrest is you're gonna have those dark rushes, and you're gonna have those glaives that are coming out. Those glaives do a huge dot to whoever has that on them. The Dark Rush really is going to put a lot of green on the floor in this first phase. So we end up taking, Ravencrest, bringing her to the side, and we end up dealing with her accordingly there. So we end up trying to keep it small, kind of taking care of it. When we do end up getting the dot from Ravencrest, I try to use a CC about halfway through, just so that it's easier for, Ash, for our healer to deal with. Now, the other trick we learned is that this jumping ability works with I-beams. You can actually jump and actually not take damage from the I-beams if you do it in a proper time. I myself was stupid and kind of messed up my timing for a little bit, but other than that, we kind of just went through it and kind of worked, and this time it didn't work for me because I did get hit with the I-beam. So I got rezzed, we kind of went for it, and we ended up DPSing it again. Now, Roman ended up dying, and we kind of just kept an eye and we kept going. So this fight's a little bit annoying to deal with in general, but overall, we got through it.
Our deck.
I'm on the right. Should we lust on this guy when it comes up, or no? Alright.
You cannot escape.
God damn it. Stop throwing that thing at me. It's actually probably better. It's all in one person. Doesn't stack.
You cannot
You do
escape.
have more defenses than Ash.
No.
Should have the same amount.
Yeah.
Moonkin gets extra defense, doesn't it?
Guards,
No.
hold them off.
In
But it's
Moonkin
warning.
form, yes.
Oh,
That's what I'm
yeah.
saying. Like,
Burn you
You get
alive.
additional armor.
Make sure you end up checking out our other channels. We have a sister channel called Gaming Fire with Lord PeteyTV, which we end up giving you some specific gaming news that is popping up here and there throughout the whole entire week. And then make sure you're also checking out our Stories with Lord PeteyTV, where we end up giving you little short stories that he's handwritten throughout the whole entire week, which we think you'll greatly appreciate. Thank you so much, and check those out. And hit the subscribe button here when you are ready. So, the one thing I always say when we're about to start, back on our quest here to kill more mobs is watch out when running around that corner so you don't get smacked by a boulder, because I've seen a bunch of people die from that. Now, the next thing is that a lot of people pull a lot of these mobs and they are not watching what's going on. Now, the thing I will say is you have to really, 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 really be super careful because of the sanguine and because of the frontals, and there's a lot of damage from people. So you have to really be careful on when you're pulling these guys and where you're pulling them, or you're going to have huge issues. So you end up watching here, pushing and moving people back and forth, and it works out really well. Me and Ash did a fantastic job just continuously pushing these mobs out of the way, so we kind of got lucky while doing that. Now, we end up doing that, we end up going through, and we end up killing those mobs very, very easily, and then we end up going forward and we start pulling in the next group. Pull a couple of mobs here, this pack here, right before the stairs. We end up doing essentially the same thing. We end up, putting our dots up, we end up DPSing them out, and we end up pulling them back. But the biggest deal is that we have to make sure that sanguine doesn't affect them, because those blade lords really, really do hurt, and we don't want them up. The more they end up putting dots on the tank, the more of a problem it's going to be. So we end up watching that, we end up doing the damage that we need to do, and then after that we get to deal with some more stone balls rolling down the staircase. Now, I tend to usually go right away, but that time I was answering something in chat, and then we end up coming right here. The Dominators that are here, we end up going after them and DPSing those guys down. Now, I end up targeting just the Dominators and try to DPS them down, and then cleave them with with Starfire and Starfall to get the bats down. Now, when I do get stuck with having the bats come after me, I do use a defensive just to make it easier for the tanks, and sometimes the tanks even try to push them off or deal with them some other way. So, because it is a tyrannical week, it is a little bit easier, so we grab the rest of them, and then we bring them into this boss room. We end up pulling them into the corner, we end up DPSing them down before we end up engaging with the boss itself. Now, the boss itself really isn't too bad, but we'll be going into that in just a moment. So, this boss is not that difficult. The only thing you have to really watch and keep an eye on dealing with is where you place your, the puddles. The Hateful Gazes, very easily dealable with. Now, the tanks can usually take one or two of them, and then, the rest is just easier to go with. Now, as you saw with that one stomp, it took about half of my health. Now, we're in a 21, so anything higher than this, for myself, I would definitely have to shapeshift or use a defensive on almost every single stomp that we end up getting. Now, the stomps themselves, the time frame between them is, it's about 25-30 seconds, so you might even need to rotate some type of defensives for later on. So we end up getting, the fell vomit, is what they call it, on myself, and I just, I end up trying to keep it in a safe place. Now, I tell people all the time, hey, I need to get someone in front of me, and they end up usually blocking the hit if need be. So from here, we end up DPSing from there, and kind of just go forward. It's not too difficult. It's just more of an time crunch, and we kind of just go through without a problem. Individual class forms?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can soak that one. No? Back out anyway.
Oh, I wasn't even trying to stand in front of him.
Was that deck?
No, that's Roman.
Rook?
Dak's currently getting screwed by lasers.
Yep.
I can take that one. Alright. Die anyway. What the fuck? Oh, I got vomited on, too. That sucks.
So I guess all the links are going to be different for each class too.
6.
After the boss dies, we go into the next area where all the risen swordsmen are, or lancers or whatever you want to call them, because there's multiple different types. Now, some people end up pulling all of them. I recommend only pulling half and then half again. Even tyrannical or fort weeks, half and half is usually the best case scenario. So we end up doing that here. We end up pulling half, they end up reverse pulling the rest of it, and we end up DPSing as much as we possibly can. They end up going down pretty quickly, and then we end up going to the next group where we end up doing the same thing. As always, just wanted to make sure you know we partner with Sub2R for our gamer glasses, our green screens, our camera mounts, our cameras, all of those enjoyable objects that we end up using while streaming for our long gaming sessions to help increase our quality of our streams. So make sure you use Lord PeteyTV at sub2r.com when you end up going there and purchasing some of this amazing gear. This last boss is a doozy, and it's just it's the only really annoying part of this whole entire dungeon, so you have to really be aware of it. So Raven Crest here ends up putting a dot on the tank over time. That does not go away for the whole entire boss fight. So the faster you end up destroying the tank, destroying the boss, or I should say part one of the boss, the less that the tank has to deal with that dot, and the healer has to deal with that dot. So in higher keys, that will really play a factor of that. Now, the other things you really want to be careful of is the glaive or the blade that they end up throwing out. And you really got to be careful of that ability that's going through the middle of the room. Now, I end up keeping an eye on it as it's going and just dealing with it. Now, part 2 comes out, and there's some really important things you really need to know about part 2. Number 1, that first Shadow Ball volley is empowered. That is always going to be coming out of the those phases. So, or I should say that phase, and also the Deadlord's Guile. So you really want to be careful of that. You really want to be using a defensive no matter what. And you kind of want to be close to your friends only because you can have to end up DPSing the storms down like we just did. So here we are. We're going through. We're DPSing them down. Now here's the Dreadlord's Guile, which we're going to have to deal with. So he ends up disappearing, and then this thing appears on the floor. So now we have to run around the room. Now, you have to really be careful of the stuff on the ground. In addition to the stuff on the ground, you really want to be careful of the swarm remnants that's on the ground, which will slow you. So so if people are standing in the middle of the room, it does make it more efficient. The Shadow Ball volleys you really have to be careful of and watch, when they're actually being cast. And then you kind of go through. So right now is a Shadow Ball volley, and you want to make sure everything's good on that. Unfortunately, Roman had not too much health there, and he ended up having a problem. And now we're kind of just going to be 4-manning it the rest of the way. We get the boss down. We end up timing the 21, which is a really good feeling in my book. And, that's just how it goes. 2 minutes.
He'll be dead before then.
Got a minute. DPS hold. A swarm on me. Damn it, pass. Cloud under us.
Mind, he might not be.
Nope, I slept myself.
Thank you so much for checking out our video here, and make sure you are checking us out on our other channels. For instance, Twitch, we're there every single Monday through Friday, and our sister channel, Gaming Fire. And make sure that you end up, hitting those follow buttons and subscribe buttons, and supporting the channel, so on and so forth. Now, we have videos coming out every single week here, how-to videos, and either other games that we end up playing. So make sure you end up checking those out, and I appreciate and love all the support. Dream big, keep gaming, and have a fantastic rest of your week. Bye, everybody.